Sooner we're done with sanctions, the better. That's the view of the man in charge of Germany's ties with Russia. Gernot Oehler says that Berlin understands the restrictions against Moscow are backfiring. Let's get the thoughts now of John Laughlin, the Director of Studies at the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation in Paris. John, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us here on RT International. Over the weekend, Joe Biden, the American Vice President, openly admitted that the restrictions were forced upon Brussels. Let's have a quick listen to what the American VP had to say.
It is true they did not want to do that. But again, it was America's leadership and the President of the United States insisting, oftentimes almost having to embarrass Europe to stand up.
John, do you think that's actually likely to have happened there?
Absolutely, and I congratulate you very much on giving prominence to this throwaway remark. I wonder whether Biden was supposed to say it or whether it just slipped out. Because, of course, here in Europe, people who are opponents of sanctions, such as the German official that you mentioned in your introduction, but also many people in France, are convinced that these sanctions were indeed forced upon Europe by the Americans. And we can see Biden admitting that. We can see Biden admitting, in other words, that the cost, the economic cost of the sanctions decided by America and forced upon Europe will be borne not by America, but by Europe. That's called putting up someone else to fight your own fight.
But what about leverage here, John? What kind of leverage does Washington have to force that upon Europe?
That, in a sense, I don't have an answer to that question, because I think that the problem is much deeper than just this issue of sanctions. I think that for many decades now, the European political class, and I use the word advisedly, I use the expression the European political class, has been under the influence of, or penetrated by, or controlled by, choose your choice of words, the Americans, to such an extent that it is not possible now, and has not been for a very long time, to talk about any independent European foreign policy, independent, that is, of the United States. On the contrary, European leaders now, for decades, have followed the Americans very, very closely indeed. The only blip came in 2003 when France and Germany refused to join the war in Iraq. Apart from that, they've been marching in lockstep.
John, if we can, let's, sorry to jump in quickly, we're a bit low on time. If we can go back to the statements we heard today, if indeed Berlin is indeed feeling the pressure, what's driving it to actually maintain these restrictions?
It's not just Berlin, Rory. France is feeling the pressure. France has a gigantic contract. You know that you and your viewers know this very well, to deliver 2 helicopter carriers. If that contract doesn't come through, France will suffer gigantic financial loss. How do we explain it? We explain it only by the control which America, through various forms, exercises over the European political class. But as I say, this is a problem that goes way beyond the present issue of sanctions. It's an ongoing problem that we've been faced with now for many decades.
Now, John, President Putin also called these sanctions utter foolishness at a major investment forum in Moscow. He says it only works actually to give an advantage to Russia's eastern partners. Do you think that could be worrying to Europe?
Yes, it is worrying. And indeed, sometimes I think that is the goal. The goal, after all, the American goal, you asked how America was achieving it. It's difficult for me to know exactly what pressure it exercises, but the goal is very clear. The goal is to tear the European continent in half and to put up a dividing line between Western Europe, between the NATO states on the one hand and Russia on the other. And the goal of doing that is to create a transatlantic free trade zone, a free trade treaty, and thereby a free trade economic and political transatlantic community. That's the geopolitical goal. We are going to see NATO, which is already a transatlantic military organization, complemented and bolstered by a transatlantic free trade zone. And both Biden and Victoria Nuland, the Deputy Secretary of State, have started talking about a transatlantic community. And that's the political project. This Ukraine conflict is a conflict about the creation of the transatlantic political, economic and military community. That's the end game here.
John Laughlin, the Director of Studies at the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation in Paris. Thank you very much indeed.